on. Okay, hello everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome back to Wednesdays with Wolbes. It is such an honor to be sitting beside my dear wife and her teacher class. So I'm really excited about this. It really is special. We missed this for the past 3 weeks, and we're very excited to get back on schedule. All right, so let's jump right in. We are in way number 12. And the 12th treat that our sages share with us on how to maximize life is to teach in order to learn. And I find this so true because I can't even tell you how many dozens and dozens of times I set up, even these 48 ways classes, I set it up to teach it, and then by the virtue of obligating myself, I had to learn the materials. I had to know it well. So obligating yourself to teach it will only increase how much you learn. And it's been to me an enormous gift to have this one way, because so much Torah I was able to learn because it's something I wanted to teach. I was very passionate about teaching it. For example, a while back we did a series on the Shema. And the reason we did that is because I wanted to learn about the Shema. And it was very important to me to know and understand something that I say 3 times a day. What I'm saying, its meaning, its purpose, its, and that's why we set a class, and we had, I think, 4 or 5 weeks that we learned about the Shema. And I gained so much from it. I don't know if everyone else in the class did, but I certainly gained a tremendous amount, because this was an opportunity for me to learn something that otherwise would be more difficult. This was the motivator. I have to teach it. I better know it. I asked my rabbi several years ago. I asked him. I said, "Is that the right way to go about it? Meaning, should I use the opportunity that I have to teach to obligate me to learn and learn new materials?" He says, "I do that all the time. Whenever there's a very difficult idea, a difficult concept, he would put up a sign in the yeshiva and the kollel where we learned that, next Tuesday or next Wednesday at 3 p.m., I'm giving a class on this topic. And then that's it. It's crunch time. Now, between now and then, I have to produce the material. I have to learn it. So that obligation is a great tool. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so too. I think that a lot of times when we teach something or we repeat it or give it over, then that gives us that ownership of the idea, and it reinforces things that we might have learned and haven't internalized, or it just helps us just know it better. I know even when I taught third grade, fourth grade. That didn't last long. I don't have the nerves. I think everyone's homeschooling now, and everyone's realizing that teaching is just not as it's just glorified babysitting. They come in, they just teach. It's really not. I think this is teachers are shining now. Everyone has a new respect for teachers, because it's really hard. And a good teacher who prepares and knows their material, and it's not so reading flashcards or reading a page ahead on the textbook and teaching over. I think kids pick up on little kids. My kids come home. You could tell who a good teacher is from little kids, which is scary, by the way. Anyway, so when I taught these young kids, I thought I'm teaching basic Chumash and maybe Rashi, which is the most simple or most basic commentary on the Chumash. And I was teaching it to them, and I'm thinking to myself, first of all, it's going to be a breeze, because it's going to be so I know this stuff. I've read this, every year, most of my life. I learned it every grade, so I know this. I got this. And I think that when I was preparing it and learning it and reviewing it and then teaching it over on a very, very basic level to the little kids, I gained so much of a deeper understanding and appreciation and knowledge of the material, especially at the lower level, because it was dumbed down for them, which is really not dumbing it down, but just the basic level. Then for me, it was just much easier to understand it and appreciate it and connect with it.
The real ultimate test of the knowledge that you have is your ability to teach it. And the greatest clarity comes through teaching, because you really need to know the material. And the amazing gift of teaching is that your students hold you accountable. Because whoa, 1 second, what are you saying? That doesn't make any sense. Prove it, right? And you have to have the background understanding, the fundamental understanding of what it is that you're teaching, so that you can properly influence and impact people in an effective way. I remember just recently, some of you may know that I just joined the Houston Hatzalah. Now, Houston Hatzalah is a volunteer first responder organization. And what we do is, if, God forbid, someone has any type of injury, or if someone has any type of illness, they're not feeling well, they'll call us, and we'll, as emergency responders, we'll get there usually very, very much earlier than the Houston Fire Department would get there. And we work closely with them. But in my process of learning the material, there's a lot of material, and there's a lot of information. And I know that the best way I learn things is when I teach it. So I obligated myself to teach that material to other guys going through the course.
Yes.
And that really propelled me to know the material so much better, to excel at it, hopefully. And that is what this way is talking about, is find someone. If there's information that you want to learn, find someone to teach it to. And then you'll know the material so much better. Right?
Yeah. No, I'm thinking when we were just saying that we were in New Jersey, and I was sitting with my sister and my father. And my father's a social worker, and my sister is a psychologist. She had to one-up him and get the doctor in front of her name. So they were saying how my sister's doing a new training program, and it's with some of my father's colleagues. And so they were saying how they sit in a class, and they have their groups, and they have to do like this therapy on another member of the group, and everyone else sits there and watches them and is judging how they're giving therapy. And my father was saying how, like, when he was just starting, and so he said he's in a room and people agree to it, I guess, and they get like a reduced rate for therapy, and they're sitting in a room, and behind him there's a glass wall, and there's 10 people in his class, and his professor and his instructor, and they're all standing and they're all watching him, do what he's doing, like teaching, counseling. Right? Counseling. And to me, I'm like having heart palpitations, like even thinking about it. It's like so stressful to have all these people, watching you and judging you, and right. But both of them said, and I think that takes a level of responsibility and maturity and everything. Both of them said that them doing what they're doing and then getting the feedback from others, right? The same as like a teacher would, and receive feedback from a proper teacher when they teach and they ask for feedback, and then they know what they're doing, and then they can improve their skills and learn how to be more effective, right? So they're getting like this whole group of people criticizing their critiquing, positive reinforcement on their style and method of teaching, of counseling, and that helped them, right? So to me, that's very stressful, but I think that's true, really, when you teach and when you study with someone, and you have to be open to receiving that feedback. We're not preaching. We're not getting up there and say, this is what I said. I'm an expert. I know everything about the subject, and listen to me because I know this, right? You're teaching. A proper teacher is open also to hearing back and getting the feedback and learning from their students as well. There's a very, very famous, I think it's in the Gemara that says, I think it's Rabbi Hanina, it says that I've learned so much from my teachers, I've learned more from my colleagues, and I've learned the most from my students. It's something like, I think like I heard 500 times from teachers in school. Like the last day of school, it's like, girls, it was such a great year, it was so wonderful, I've learned so much but I've learned more than I've taught you, you've taught me, and I've grown, right? It's a thing that people say, but really it is true, because when you teach properly and you are ready to accept from your students, then you can gain that deeper level, and you discuss back and forth, and you can get to the bottom line better.
And so we discussed, if we look at the past couple of weeks, right, what did we talk about? We said to have a rabbi. We said to have a friend. And now we're saying to have a student. To make wisdom your student, right? Make the knowledge that you have, share it. We have an obligation, our sages teach us that we have an obligation to teach what we know. We're not allowed to be selfish and say, hey, I'm just going to keep it for myself. So let me share with you such a beautiful idea. All right? If you take the word which is to teach, it's lamed. Lamed means to teach. Also a letter in the alphabet, the letter lamed. Right? We're all familiar with the letter lamed. In fact, it's the only letter in the Hebrew alphabet that goes above the line. Right? If you think about all of the letters in the Torah, some go beneath the line, but none go above the line except for Lamed. The letter Lamed sticks its hand up and goes above the line. It's very interesting. So let me show you. If you look here, I drew a letter Lamed. Okay? And if you look at the Lamed, one reaches up. And that's what our sages tell us is you go to your teacher. Reach up to your teacher and receive Torah. Over here is the next way that we discussed, which is discuss it with a friend. Internalize it. Make it part of you. And then your obligation is to pass it down to the next generation. Pass it to your students. Pass it to the others. That's all embedded in the one letter of how it's designed, the letter Lamed. It has these three components of the Lamed. The part which reaches up, we get it from our teachers, from our educators, from our parents. Then we pass it along, we not pass it along, but we internalize it. We make it part of who we are. And then we pass it down and move it to the next generation of students and of our descendants. So we have to, there's a very important principle here, is that we have to try to live what we learn. It's a very important principle. We have to live what we learn. And I remember once a student of my grandfather came and he was talking about a certain idea that he was trying to convey to his students. My grandfather asked him, do you live by that? He said, me, I don't live by it, right? But he says, then how can you talk about it? How can you talk about something that you don't live by, right? We have to practice what we preach. Now, I've mentioned many times that I'm not perfect and that I try my best to do everything I can to try and implement. I use the teaching that I do as a workshop for my own personal growth. It's not that I'm preaching from on top, hey, I'm perfect, and now let me share with you my wisdom. No. On the contrary, I'm imperfect, and I'm trying to work on that perfection, and this is the workshop that we're working on this together. So it's a very different approach. Receive from a teacher top down, share it, internalize it, discuss it, clarify it, and then teach it to others. Teach it to others. Also very interesting is that if you look at the letter that sticks up of the Lamed, the part that sticks up of the Lamed, the part that goes horizontal and the part that goes back down, they're all vavs. It's a vav, and a vav. 3 vavs. The letter vav is the 6th letter of the alphabet. The numerical value of the letter vav is 6. 6 times 3 is 18, which is chai. If you want to make the Torah that you learn to be living, then you have to go through this process. The Torah, we want it to become a living thing within us. We have to learn it from someone, we have to internalize it, and we have to pass it on to someone else. I think it's a remarkable idea just from the letter Lamed.
I know some of you know that I'm more like, I'm always scared to speak publicly and to teach classes, and whenever I'm approached, I'm like, nah. And I think a big part of it for me is that I'm like, who am I to teach this? I'm not the expert on this. I don't know what I'm saying, I feel like someone who, you have like a speaker and you have world-renowned this or the expert on this, and will be giving a class. So I'm like, hey, what do I know? And I think that that's wrong, and I think that I should, for myself, do better on that, and to share, because that's what I'm doing, sharing to everyone else. Also, that it doesn't mean, I don't think that you have to present yourself as an expert on the subject and say, I know everything there is to know about the Torah, about science, about this, about whatever topic it is that you're discussing, right? I think that we have to just say that I have some, none of us are experts in everything, okay? So if we're sitting in a room, I think for me also, if I'm sitting in a class, if I'm teaching, and in that group there's like some doctor or like an older respected person or this or that, and I'm like, it's like more pressure. It's like more, but like this neuroscientist, whatever, he doesn't know how to fly an airplane. Is that embarrassing? There's a pilot sitting right there. Is that embarrassing that he doesn't know how to, bake a perfect babka? Or everyone has different things that they can learn from everyone else. So I think that we have to be open to it's important for all of us to be open to learning from others, but also for us to say there are things that I know. There are things that, like Aryeh said, that if someone who has knowledge on a certain subject and doesn't share it, it's wrong. It's morally wrong. If you have knowledge, if you know something, if someone discovered the cure for cancer, the cure for coronavirus, the cure, right? And he says, I'll just share it with myself, my family. Why should I share it? That's wrong, right? And the same would go for if someone has the cure for happiness, for feeling lonely, for feeling whatever it is, right? People share your information. People respect that. People want to hear different things from what you want to share. And I think that we have to know that all of us should accept opportunities that we have to teach. And it doesn't mean teaching and getting in front of a classroom and teaching. It means that you heard something from a class that you went to. You heard something from a friend, or you read something online, a nice article, and you gained something, a deep knowledge, an appreciation for something. So don't just keep that for yourself. Share it, pass it along, forward it to a friend or two or three, post that, I'm saying, share that with other people. And then when the next time you're in HEB or I'm sitting on the airplane, someone's like, oh, you're Jewish. Do you know the blah, blah, right? And ask you something, or your coworker oh yeah, I'm Jewish, but I never, whatever. I know there's a holiday coming up. So if you learn about it and you know something and you have that opportunity to share, don't just say, oh yeah, it's this. Tell them something, share something with them, because maybe whatever it is, even you don't have to be that expert on that subject, but whatever it is, the information you have, the knowledge, the passion you have for whatever subject it is, if you could share that with others, then that's amazing.
We have to teach whenever we can, right? And the more we practice, the better we get at it. I remember the first time I taught a class in Houston, and I was so nervous, and I was terrified. I was like, I don't know who's going to be there. I remember it was a few weeks after I arrived to Houston, and I was asked by the Chevra Kadisha in Houston. They did an annual event, and they had a special event for the high school students to do a project. And this was going to be the ceremony where they're going to select who wrote the best article, or who did the project best, who won and they wanted someone to speak. So they asked me. I was a new rabbi in town, and they asked me to speak. And I was terrified. I had no idea who these people were. I had no idea, where this was going to be, even this location. I've never been there. I'm new to the city, and I was very nervous, and it was overwhelming. So I prepared whatever I could prepare, and I gave the speech, and that was it. Okay, thank you so much, and I left. A few months later, I met somebody, and he told me, he says, were you the rabbi who spoke at the Chevra Kadisha event? I said, yes, and I was afraid. It's like, this was my debut, and I was like, and he says, I want you to know that was the best lecture I've ever heard in my life. Right? I was like, whoa, I thought it was so terrible. They'll never talk to me again. They'll never invite me back. Turns out with this individual, I learned now for the past 15 years, every single week we learn together. From that one speech that I was terrified to give, from that one experience of teaching, we learn together every single week now for 15 years since we moved here. Since that time, since that. So we never know the impact something, the teaching that we have can have on someone else. We never know the impact that it can have. And what we need to do when we teach is to ask, what did you understand? What did you understand from what we learned? If you're teaching someone how to do something on a computer, right? You're teaching someone how to, many times, I'm a techie, but I'm not a techie compared to my children. I mean, they know how to use the phones so much quicker. They know all the features and exactly how to move things, right? So I stopped them. I said, whoa, one second. What did you do? Just tell me what you did. Let me see so I can understand. But when we teach, we need to do the same thing. We need to ensure that the people we taught, right? We have this with our children. There's some children you can tell them, okay, be back by 9 o'clock, right? And then they come back at 10 o'clock. We're like, we told you to be back by 9 o'clock. Like, what? I didn't. So what we try to do is tell them before they leave, what time did I tell you to be home? 9 o'clock. Okay, very good. And they repeat it. Now they got it. And many times, till we don't have the learner repeat what it is they learn, they didn't really learn it yet.
We're talking a lot about chavrusa, right? So I think that's also, they did a study, I forgot where it was, I saw this a while ago, that they tested, thousands of students in different schools over a few years and all these experts, right? And they're trying to figure out the best, most successful way to teach and how to get people to learn. And they found that the most effective way was to have peer learning, because when the student teaches to the other student, he feels like he's teaching, so he gets that, right? And then they share, and they each one takes a turn teaching, and each one becomes a teacher. That's what we have. And a proper chavrusa, a proper study pair, when people have that, right? So they one of them is teaching the other one's learning, right? And they feed off each other, but they're each it's not a teacher and a student. It's two peers, they each have the opportunity to be a teacher. And it gives them that connection for learning. I think that's very helpful and beneficial.
Well, I just want to make a caveat to what Zehava said. She mentioned earlier that you should share something. You see something insightful. You see a nice article. I just want to give a disclaimer that it might not be a good idea in this heated election cycle to forward articles or videos from a convention, whether it be the DNC, the RNC, to share it with people who don't share those views, because they can become irate and you could lose friendships. So I just want to recommend, if you know that they're able to hear a different opinion, whatever your opinion is, share it in a very respectful way. Just because you know something doesn't mean that the other person is ready to hear it.
But also that goes to the whole idea of teaching versus preaching. It doesn't mean, teaching, sharing, and passing on the information or knowledge that you have. So you're not always right. They're not always right. You don't know everything. You can learn from others. But if there is something that you want to share, make sure you're doing it in a respectful way. And you're not shoving like, I know better than you, and this is the right way, this is the thing. So I think that's also very important. But we all do have the ability to share things and to help other people. This happens a lot. I get a phone call from someone, I'm baking this and and I'm like, I'm not Martha Stewart, I'm not the expert on this, but I do know stuff. I've baked a good time or two, right? So maybe there is something I could tell. Someone called me now 2 days ago. She asked me, she said, I'm having such a hard time with this whole lockdown. I've been at home for months with my kid. I have one kid. You have 7. How do you do it? I don't understand. And I'm like, who am I to give her advice? Like, listen to a parenting class, call an expert, see a psychologist, right? But no, that's a terrible way to. I think that after a certain amount of children, I have like a PhD or something in parenting or something. There are some things that I might know due to experience, due to whatever, that I could share. So why should I just say, like, I don't know anything, I shouldn't say anything. Also, if you don't know anything, though, that's also like the other thing. If you don't know, don't share, because that's a mistake a lot of people make, is that when they're asked the question and they don't know the answer, or they like to give advice on things that they really know nothing about, So make sure if you are sharing, if you are giving help, if you are giving advice, make sure it's something that's makes sense. And
so I don't know if any of you watch television or listen to radio a lot, but I was once interviewed on a radio program here in Houston, and they were asking me many different questions about a certain topic, and then they asked a question that I didn't have an answer for. I didn't know an answer for it. So I said, I'll be honest with you, I don't know. And there was deafening silence on the radio. Deafening silence. Like, what? I'm like, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. And it's something that they just never heard such a thing, that someone says, I don't know. You ever see on television, they interview someone about, so what did you think about that latest speech? And they didn't even hear it. And they just talk and they just say things that it's like, you can say, I don't know. I haven't formulated an opinion yet. No, but everybody wants to sound smart. And our sages tell us, you want to see a wise, hopefully I fall into this category. But if you want to see a wise person, find someone who says, I don't know. That's in it, right? And that's what I try to. Now, I want to just stop at this moment for a second and tell you about a remarkable teacher that has done an unbelievable amount of teaching. And that is my dear brother, Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe. Okay? Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe has 7 podcast channels. And I am very, very, very excited to announce that just yesterday, he passed the 1 million downloads of his podcast. 1 million downloads. You know what 1 million hours of Torah is? It's unbelievable. I'm so proud. It is unbelievable. And if you get a chance, you can visit torchpodcast.com. You can visit rabbiwolbe.com. You can see and you can subscribe and listen to his podcast. It really is remarkable. But I want to tell you why I think it's so special. Because he doesn't just learn some topics and teach it. He has studied and mastered the art of podcasting, of influencing people through this medium. And all the time he's doing more and more research. It's not just random that he's gotten 1 million downloads. It is after many years of working hard and trying again to figure out what is the tool. And wherever I go, I see people come over to me. Oh, are you the Rabbi Wolbe? I said, no, it's my brother, Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe. And it really is so special and it's so amazing. So I want to encourage you all, when you get a chance, go to rabbiwolbe.com, go to torchpodcasts.com, and subscribe. Become a listener, because he is an amazing teacher, and it really is an amazing privilege that he's my brother, A, and B, that he works with us at Torch, and that we can have such an incredible partnership in teaching Torah to the world. So I think that, teaching others is a meaningful way, is a deep expression of creativity. And there's no question that he has creativity and that he's found unbelievable ways to connect people to Torah. And I'm really, really very proud of him. But I want to talk about a different part of learning, and that is that sometimes letting people fall or lose is the greatest educator. The greatest educator could be when they fail, and let them fail because they'll try harder. Do you know that Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest basketball player ever, do you know that he was thrown off his basketball team in high school because he wasn't good enough? Do you know that Babe Ruth, who had the most home runs, also had the most strikeouts? And he said, every strikeout gets me closer to my next home run. Right? That is really great lessons in, I think, if I recall correctly, Michael Jordan once thanked his teacher, his gym teacher, who threw him off the team. He says, it's because of you that propelled me to become even greater, and to win all those championships, and to get all of those titles, right? It was because the teacher threw them out, right? Sometimes that could be the greatest, and I don't know that the teacher ever intended for that, but sometimes that, I remember myself when I was 20 years old, I went to 20, 21 years old, I went to Memphis, Tennessee, and I was there, for a summer, and as the program was over, I was there for 2, 3 weeks. We got very close to the community, me and a bunch of other yeshiva students, and they said, how are we going to stay in touch? So I said, I volunteered to do a weekly Dvar Torah that I will mail out to all of the community people, all the community members. And we did. It was a nice email list, and all these people were getting, I started sending out one weekly parsha and another weekly parsha email, and slowly but surely. And I remember that my older brother, one time told me, he says, there are many people who started, but very few that finished the whole cycle of the Chumash, of the Torah. And that was my motivator, right? His doubting me was my motivator. And I remember when I was done doing the full cycle of all 54 portions of the Torah, I was like, I felt so accomplished. I felt that, and I owed that gratitude to my brother for doubting me, because that was the greatest motivator that I could have had, is someone who said, you can't do it. And I had to prove myself, yes, I can do it. So the fact that someone fails shouldn't be an opportunity for them to give up, but rather to push them harder, to try harder, and to succeed in another area. Just an interesting thing, you've all heard of the Shark Tank, I'm sure. And one of the moguls that are on Shark Tank is Mark Cuban. And Mark Cuban, he owns the Dallas basketball team. And he was a failure as a carpenter, as a cook, as a waiter, who didn't even know how to open up a bottle of wine. Right? That's true. But he said, I've learned that it doesn't matter how many times you failed. He says you have to make it right once. You have to be right once. He says, I tried to sell powdered milk. I was an idiot a lot of the times, and I learned from all of them. Right? It really is remarkable that people who don't stop trying and don't stop learning and don't stop trying to be a student of wisdom, right? And of course, never to give up. That's also part of being a good teacher, is to know how to convey things to our students. And it's not always going to be roses and lilies. Sometimes it's going to be more harsh and more difficult, and we're going to have to fail them for them to succeed.
The way that we're doing this time is pilpul talmidim, which means teaching, right? But the word pilpul is also from the word in Hebrew pilpel, which means pepper, which is spicy and tough and rough. So I think part of also like with teaching is sometimes it's tough, sometimes it's rough, sometimes you have to be a little spicy and be a little, but there's a certain flavor that has to come across sometimes, but
to challenge. I think to challenge it. Don't just accept it because someone said it. Oh, they must be wiser than me, so I'm going to take it for what they said. No, challenge people and challenge them to not for the sake of challenging, for the sake of finding the truth. And that's always something that's cherished in the Torah, is the ability to challenge we have this in Talmud, in our Talmud, Thinking Talmudist series every Friday at 12 o'clock here on torchzoom.com, right? So we have, every week we learn a different piece of Talmud, and we see the same theme again and again and again, where the rabbis are challenging a premise. You're saying this as a given. Whoa, hold it. Who even said that premise is true? And they have to bring it from a verse, and they have to prove it. Right? We don't take anything for granted. We don't take any premise as a given. Prove it. Because when we're striving for truth, when we're striving for knowledge, it's critical that we not just bite the bullet. Let's know. We want to verify. We want to know that this is indeed correct. John Wooden once said, winners make the most errors because they never quit. Right? That is the key. The key is we're not allowed, right? Students make you honest with yourself, which is a very important thing, right? If you don't believe in it, it will never have an impact. You have to really feel it. I do a training course for rabbis every year in Israel, and I do it on video conference. And it's been already probably 12 or 13 years that I've been doing talking from Houston, Texas, and sharing my insights in the meaning of Jewish outreach. And they always ask me, they say, Rabbi, we're going out, we're going to be living in any town USA or anywhere around the world. What should we learn with people? What should we teach them? And my answer is always, teach something you're passionate about. Because passion has impact. Passion sells. If you don't have passion, you can't teach something in a meaningful way. Right? Which is why if someone calls me, I had this young lady, a really special organization that called me a couple of weeks before Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, and they wanted me to do a class online for a bunch of young women, teenage girls, and they wanted me to talk about Tisha B'Av and the meaning and how to. It was a great thing that I had 2-3 weeks to think about it, so that I can start formulating and getting a passion for what it is I'm going to say. To not just like, oh, I just read, and let me just read it off, my notes to you. No, it's something that I've been able to hopefully internalize and make it part of who I am, so I can convey it now with passion.
That's
right?
Another, one of those, like, I've learned more from my students, right? So another one of those is, it's Devarim hayotzim min halev nechnasim el halev, right? So like the words that come from your heart enter the hearts. That's when you're teaching and you're passionate about it and you feel it and you believe what you're saying, that enters the students or whoever's listening to you. That will be more effective than, again, like you're saying, like reading straight from a paper or whatever. So you'll hear that expression a lot. Like someone will speak, and then someone else will come up after them and say, "Oh, the words that came from your heart go into," right? So like meaning that they connected to that kind of thought more than just some big idea. It is important to be passionate about what you teach about. It's important to know what you're talking about. I was at a class recently, like a few months ago. I was sitting in like a lecture for a few in a row, and there were two of them that I was just like, and I'm like, is this what our kids have to do every single day? They go to school and they sit through teachers and teachers and teachers for hours. I'm like, it's child abuse. Like, how do we let our kids do this, right? We have to make sure if you're teaching, if you're given that opportunity, that you actually say things that make sense, that you research, that you know what you're saying, and that it's something that you care about. And the teachers who just read off their notes and like blah blah blah, they're not getting the Teacher of the Year award. They're not effectively teaching their students.
Don't bore your audience. If it's not interesting to you, why would it be interesting to them? That's the bottom line. Is you have to be excited, you have to be energized by what it is that you're teaching, right? But that's as teachers, as educators, as parents, as parents, right? Like you said, we are educators, right? We are teachers. We're teaching our children, and we have to know. My grandfather spends a lot of time talking about education and the effective way to educate our children, right? My father always says, if you want your child to do something, tell them not to do it, right? Right? Tell them not to do it, suddenly they want to do it, right? And if you tell them to do something, they won't want to do it. That's you have to learn the nature of the beast.
Also, as you're teaching children, when we see our children struggling with a certain thing, let's say they're having difficulty with whatever it is. So it's something that as a parent you want to help your kid, and you don't necessarily know how to help them. So you want to research it. You want to learn that subject. Let's say a kid is like, I don't have friends. I'm so bored. I'm unhappy. Whatever challenge that kid might be dealing with. It's something that you can research and you could learn and you can know more about that subject, so you can better help them. And a lot of times things that, let's say, either something that we're teaching our children, or let's say like that I was just saying someone who called me 2 days ago and was asking me the advice, right? But when you share it with someone else, that also reinforces it for you. When she asked me, so what do you do with, and I'm giving her all these great tips and great advice, and I'm like, oh yeah, those are actually good ideas. I should try those, right? And I like make sure it's a reminder to me when you're teaching someone, when you're giving over that idea, it reinforces it. It reminds you things, and then you can also remember that these are things that are important to you. And it's like, a friend of ours had a child with, unfortunately, with, brain cancer, right? She would do anything in the world to help her kid. So she researched and researched and researched and read articles, made herself literally crazy, reading every article, researching everything, finding any doctor. By the time she was done, she had more knowledge than your average brain surgeon possibly. But she would do anything it is to help her child. So when our kid is struggling with something, we want to do that research. We want to help them so that we can, help them with whatever it is they're struggling with it. And very, very often, a lot of things that, especially for a child, something that a child is struggling with, likely it's something that you might be struggling with as well. Maybe it's something that they're not getting, whether it's, let's say, bad eating habits or whatever it is, happiness, or they're spending too much time on their phone. Maybe you're spending too much time on your phone. Maybe something, instead of telling them to, go outside and get fresh air, maybe you do that too. Maybe you put down your phone when you're with your kids so that they see that, and then when you're sharing that and teaching that, then that can reinforce those kind of ideas.
Yeah. We need to be careful never to discourage. There's an age of little children that they ask why. You say, come, let's go to sleep. Why? Come, let's get dressed. Why? And they ask why. And sometimes it can get very frustrating, especially when you have more than one child, and it is like you're trying to get all the kids ready for school, and you're trying to get all their lunches ready and their bags ready and everything. And you have this one child say, okay, it's time to get dressed. Why? Right? And they're asking, just do it, right? Our sages tell us that we have to be very careful not to discourage the whys of our children. The whys are very, very important. It's something that we need to learn to always be able to ask that question. Investigate. Don't just take it because someone said it. Why? Why should I believe that? By the way, we're in an election, right? Why should I vote a certain way? Because my parents did? Maybe I shouldn't. Right? Maybe I should think independently. Maybe I shouldn't necessarily feel the same way because, I'm told to do so. Ask, question, become a student of wisdom. Another thing is teaching by example. Teaching by example is a really, really, really important thing, because when we teach, I don't know which class I said the story in, but a father once came to the Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish passed away in 1953. In fact, about the Chazon Ish, he was such an amazing Torah scholar, right? It was an unbelievable privilege that my grandfather was close to him, and he encouraged my grandfather to open his yeshiva. And when my father was born, the Chazon Ish came to be the sandik for his at his bris. He was the godfather of my father. And it was just 2 weeks before he passed away. It was the second to the last opportunity where the Chazon Ish actually performed that mitzvah of holding the baby during the bris. It was very, very special. But a father once came to the Chazon Ish and said to him, my son was talking in shul, and I yelled at him. So the Chazon Ish said, you know what you did? He says, you told your son that it's okay to get angry. Right? He says, that's what you told your son. He says, what do you mean? I told him that he shouldn't talk in shul. He says, yeah, but that, you just used words for. But your anger that you had, he saw in action. And kids learn from actions, not from words. And it's such a powerful idea, is that our actions have far greater influence than our words. And if we want to be that teacher, we have to show it by an example. We have to show it by our character, by who we are, and not just by words. And it's funny, if you talk about politics, many times people take a candidate, or people take because of words they said, right? But not by their actions, right? We have to look at actions. It's the most important judgment of a person is their actions, not their words. The words are important, but that doesn't define the person. It's very important.
That's like teacher versus preacher, like we were saying before. A preacher just preaches, do as I say, not as I do, right? And a teacher will show by example. A good teacher will show by example. You see these like kids, you ever see these like angel perfect kids, and like to their parents, they're like, yes ma'am, or yes sir, and I'm like, who does that? Like right? And there was a family like I saw, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're these like perfect angel kids. Like how do they even do that? And little did I know then, but I saw later, these kids were not angels. Let me just say, right? And their parents yelled and screamed and were very forceful, right? And the kids were terrified, so they, yes sir, yes ma'am, yes whatever, and they did it, and they like behaved perfectly. But the second they were old enough that they weren't scared of their parents anymore, they very far from because they weren't taught properly. They were just forced and into a certain style of behavior. So obviously that's also very ineffective, and that's not
The Mishnah says that when someone arrives at the age of 70, it's the term that is used for someone at the age of 70 and older is they've reached zikna, which means, let's call it seniority in Hebrew. But the word zikna also means zekana. This person who reaches the age of 70 has acquired. What has he acquired? The Talmud says, zekana chokhmah. He acquired wisdom. And that's why the halacha tells us that, and the Torah tells us, the Torah commands us that we have to have respect for our elders. Our sages tell us that's over the age of 70. Why? Someone age 70 walks into a room, you're obligated to stand up. You know why? Because the greatest value in Judaism is wisdom. And when wisdom walks into the room, you stand up, even if they're not Jewish. They don't have to be a rabbi. But if someone is over the age of 70, and it obviously does not apply to any of you teenagers out there that I'm looking at, right? So when someone is 70 years old, they have life experience, they have wisdom, right? We say, my rabbi used to say, a white here means information center. This person has wisdom. This person has knowledge. Zekana, right? When someone has zikna, when someone is an elder, it means they have wisdom. Wisdom is something we acknowledge, something we respect, and that's why we stand up when someone who's 70 years old walks into a room. Because it's critically important that we continue to always have respect and acknowledge someone who has wisdom.
I think it is very important to listen to elders and to accept knowledge. It's funny, I took all the kids today, everyone together to the dentist. Not advised to take them all at once. It was a very long and painful experience. But the dentist actually said to my daughter, it's like, she was wearing on her mask said, be the reason someone smiles today. So he got into a whole conversation with her about making people smile, and he got into a conversation with her about talking to the elderly, and he was saying how they have so much knowledge, and you have to respect them and listen to them because they have so much knowledge to share. It's just funny that you're talking about it now. But also, it's, of course, elders, but we also have to realize that information and knowledge and so much valuable information can come even from children. And I think that we have to be ready. We're talking about teaching, but we also have to be ready to accept, right? And if you're on the Torch Minute, another shameless plug here, right? If you get the Torch Minute video every day, Torch Minute-ish, I'm gonna call it, right? And you see the things, and a few of them are from my children, Ahuva or Shomo, and there's a bunch from my nephew, who's amazing, Yaakov Goretz, my 12-year-old nephew, and he's like adorable, and he gives these like amazing, powerful, like little messages. And if someone's gonna be like, who are they to tell me what to, or a kid gets up at the Shabbos table and says a Dvar Torah, right, a thought on the week's program. A lot of kids at the Shabbos table, they'll learn something in school that they're supposed to give over at the Shabbos table, right? And that's something so amazing, so impactful on the kids, because that makes them so gives them that confidence to like get up there and share their information, to share what they learn with other people. So a kid will get up at a Shabbos table and share a little thought, and it could be amazing. It could be they totally botch it. It's just adorable. But if an adult's like, who's this 6-7-year-old to tell me what Moses says about, well, you're missing out on an opportunity because you might be hearing something amazing. So I think we all have to be open to learning from everyone and accepting wisdom, and we also have to take opportunities whenever they come up and make sure that when there is an opportunity, not to be that person, you know what I'm talking about. But like, if you have something that that you share, that you want to pass along to others, I think it's really special. There's so much darkness, there's so much confusion confused how to say the word, confusion and craziness out there in the world, right? So every drop of positivity, every drop of knowledge and help and stuff that you can put out there, do it. Put out good vibes, put out good things in the world, and then don't just keep things for yourself. Share it.
It's an amazing thing. If you've ever gone to Israel, which I hope you've all gone to Israel, I hope you've also gone to the Dead Sea. It really is remarkable. It's a special. But one thing I would recommend you do not do, don't drink the water at the Dead Sea. It is so bitter. Now, if you look at where the water source for the Dead Sea comes from the Connect. The Connect is the Sea of Galilee. And the Galilee leads water right into the Dead Sea. And it's the most remarkable thing that the Sea of Galilee has sweet, delicious water. So how does that make sense that the Dead Sea is so bitter and its source, the Sea of Galilee, is so refreshing and delicious? Our sages tell us because the Dead Sea is not a giver, so it's bitter. It keeps it all for itself. The Sea of Galilee, on the other hand, is a giver. It keeps feeding water to the Dead Sea, so it's sweet. The more we're able to become givers of our wisdom, the more we're able to become givers of our resources, the sweeter we become. But if we're only takers, then we're bitter, God forbid. And that's something that our sages warn us about, not keeping wisdom for ourselves. In our prayer that we say every morning, it's lilmod ulilamed, lishmor velasod. Lilmod, learn it and teach it right away. You learn something special, you hear something special, share it with someone. Enlighten someone's day. So we mentioned previously the 4 different steps of learning, and that is, number 1 is you plow, just like with something that grows from the ground. With our agriculture, we have to plow, we have to sow, we have to harvest, and then we consume. Same thing with learning. The first is we plow, it's a new concept. But then the next is let it sink in. We're sowing, right? Understand the idea. Number 3 is we harvest. We gain clarity. We gain an experience with this idea. And then the 4th is we consume it, and that is absorb it and make it part of who you are. Integrate it into your life. So that's it I have for you. Anything else you want to share?
We're good.
All right. So just as a summary conclusion, when we teach, we examine our learning and gain a greater understanding of the subject. It gives confidence and it gives insight. So my dear friends, thank you so much for joining us. To our friends on Facebook, thank you for joining us. Please like and share these videos. And shalom from Texas. For those